everyone, welcome to episode 34 of Show Fever. Today we'll be going over the anime series Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe. Now, this is an adaptation of the manga by Hirohiko Araki, which goes over the miscellaneous adventures of Rohan Kishibe, who is a character from Part 4 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is my favorite part. Though I'm believing that Steel Ball Run is going to be able to overtake it, but I haven't read the whole thing yet. I only got 5 books so far, since 6 hasn't been released yet. So there is still a moment for it to possibly be overtaken. But at the moment, Part 4 is my favorite part. So I was like, you know what, we got Steel Ball Run coming up in just, 12 days. So why not watch some JoJo's to get back into the swing of things? So I was like, you know what, I haven't watched Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe, so I'm going to watch the anime series. And I was gladly surprised. It's only 4 episodes, so it's not that big of a watch. And it was really enjoyable. Because, I really enjoyed Part 4, and I love the side characters. But Rohan's just kind of those ones that kind of fell into the loop for me personally. But as I watched the show, I was like, hey, I kind of actually like Rohan more. And especially, what's it called? It's not Heaven's Door. Yeah, and Heaven's Door. But that's his stand. But yeah, so we start off on episode 1 where we deal with Rohan going to Italy briefly because Koichi, all these take story of him telling a story from a cafe. So, except for Millionaire Village and The Run. Yeah, no, The Run is told. No, I don't know. The Run's not told to do it. But episode 1, Koichi's like, okay, I need you to tell me, use Heaven's Door to make me learn how to speak Italian. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. But, because, as we know, he eventually goes to Italy in part 5 to find Giorno. But, yes, so he starts off, and he gets to telling him about time when he was in Italy, and he discusses how he met this man, because Rohan was, researching about, confessional booths and, the Italian churches and all that. And so he went to a confessional booth and accidentally ended up being the pastor for a confessional. And so, for a confession. And so the man who is confessing ends up telling him a story about how he was a worker. And one day on the job, a hobo came up to him. He was like, give me some food. I need food. And the dude was like, you're a bum, bro, so I'm not going to give you any food. So he made him work for it. And then he didn't really plan on giving him his food. And the dude ended up getting crushed beneath a sack and dying. And so this dude ends up encountering this being that crawls toward him, and it's like, I'm going to curse you, and you're going to be prosperous until the best day you have. And so after this man ends up falling into a lot of money. He ends up making a lot of corn-based products, like popcorn and cornflakes and all that, and he becomes really rich. He has a family, he has a model wife, he has a bunch of butlers, I think it's 15, and he ends up having a daughter. And one day he's walking with his daughter, and this is his happiest day. He lets his guard down once, and this becomes his happiest day. And then it switches up. It's not even a stand, I don't believe, but it is some demon or whatever. And it ends up popping up in his daughter and making him flick popcorn in the air and catch it in his mouth, or he's going to kill him. And so if he can do it 3 times, then he will be released, and he'll be able to go along his way. However, he flicks it up, gets it once, and then the second time, he flicks it up again, and seagulls come flying in, but he lights it ablaze with some lighter fluid or something like that, and it ends up falling down, but it lands on his shoulder rather than in his mouth. And he might have got 2, and I believe the second one did come in because the second one was the seagull one, and the third one was when he threw it up, and then it landed on his shoulder, and he ends up getting killed. However, we're curious to how is he giving this confession. Now, what he had done was he had made one of his butlers swap his body with him, and so he continued to live on another person, and the other person was looking for vengeance on it. But yeah, that's kind of how that story is. Because each of these are really self-contained stories. But yeah, so then we move on to episode 2, which is Mutsukabe Hill, and it deals with the story of, because Rohan is telling about how he purchased a lot of land up in these hills, and it was essentially worthless because he ended up going there and ended up getting his research done anyway, so he just wasted his money. And that's why he's kind of broke in the series so far, and he's bumming with Koichi at the moment. But yeah, so we ended up learning about the mystery of Mutsukabe Hill. And what happened was this girl who was having an affair, an affair because she was engaged to a man, and she was with another man. And her dad and the other fiance ended up pulling up, and she's like, you gotta leave. He's just joking around. He's kind of being rude and weird. And eventually she pushes him away, and he falls back, lands, and his head is busted open with a golf club, and he dies. And we see as she tries to staunch the bleeding, and these people are getting ready to come in, she's trying to figure out a way to get rid of the body, and eventually it just keeps bleeding. She can't find a way for it to stop, and it keeps bleeding, and eventually she just rolls him up in a mat, puts him on the fridge, and her fiance comes in. He's like, yo, is everything good in here? And she's like, yeah, everything's fine. And she is actively drinking the blood that is pouring out so it doesn't pool on the ground, which was really nasty. But yeah, so eventually he's like, okay, yeah, everything's fine. So he leaves. Now, after this, they end up getting married, but she has to keep the body and keep it from bleeding everywhere. So what she does is she puts it in a vial each day and discards that vial, and she eventually ends up getting freaky with this corpse. And therefore, the trait of the corpse, like it's like a demon, is passed on to her daughter. So as Rohan is up in these hills researching, he eventually finds the daughter. The daughter runs into him and she's talking with him, talking about how there's perverts in this hill. So she goes and runs off, and she ends up busting her head open on the ground. And she ends up essentially bleeding to death. However, Rohan is able to use Heaven's Door at the moment as she's fading away to write all of it back in and essentially revitalize her. That shows how powerful Heaven's Door is. Like, we don't see as much to that degree in actual part 4, but in whatchamacallit, Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe, we see like Heaven's Door do some crazy stuff. But yeah, he ends up doing that, and everything's solved, and that one kind of ends, and she ends up living, and then we move on to episode 3. Now, episode 3 is probably my favorite. I love Millionaire Village because it was really cool. But, so what we do is he's talking with his editor, Kyoka Izumi. I love the design of Kyoka Izumi, or I'll just say Izumi, because it was just cool. It was a design you really don't ever see in JoJo's. It was really unique, and I was like, that's a really cool design. So Izumi had a cool design. But then we learn about how there are this group of millionaires living in complete seclusion, like self-generated electricity, water, sewage, all of that. And they're living up in seclusion in these mountains. And she has found an opening for a house for 3 million yen. She wants to go up there and interview for it so that she can eventually live up there, because she's 25 and all of them went up there at age 25 and eventually became wealthy. So she believes the same thing will happen to her. So they move along, and they end up going there, her and Rohan do, and eventually they meet up with the little butler dude, and the little butler just kind of, it's a cool design too, it's creepy looking in a way, but, yeah, they end up talking, and the main goal here is to maintain etiquette. However, eventually Izumi breaks etiquette when she's drinking a glass of tea, and when you break etiquette in this, what happens is it's a god, I believe, it's the god of the mountains. And what happens is when you break etiquette, you lose something important to you. So she gets a call after this, how her boyfriend and mom are dead. And she's freaking out. And Rohan has in his pocket, because before this they saw a baby bird in the woods, and they picked it up, put it in this little box, and Rohan's leg starts bleeding. I was like, what happened to Rohan? But it was actually the bird got crushed. So she broke etiquette 3 times, and therefore 3 bad things happened to her, because she liked the little bird. And obviously her mother and her boyfriend. But yeah, so this leads to Rohan kind of freaking out, and Rohan actually ended up breaking etiquette as well, and this leads to Izumi falling out in a heart attack, and Rohan eventually starts kind of calculating. He's like, okay, how do I stop this? And he ends up using Heaven's Door, which is what led to Izumi having a heart attack. He used Heaven's Door on the kid, or the butler, and this ended up breaking etiquette and leading to her falling out. But Rohan, in this instance, he ended up writing into the kid with Heaven's Door that he would break etiquette in a specific way by walking like the gap between mats. And he ends up doing this, and the kid ends up breaking etiquette. He starts freaking out, and he's like, Rohan Kishibe, will you continue? And he's like, no. And so Izumi ends up being revived because he was able to make the kid break etiquette, so he kind of beat him at his own game. And they walk out into the forest, and they see that the baby bird is still alive, so we presume that her mother and boyfriend actually ended up living. Well, no, I believe it stated that, stated that one of her family members really freaked out and called her to a little bit too preemptively, so they ended up living. Then we move on to episode 4, which was also a really good one. It was actually kind of funny. It was called The Run. And it follows the life of this dude who was walked up to by a modeling agency while he was on the road. She's like, you want maybe some money? And so he ended up being a model, starring in a minor film. And eventually she put him on this workout regimen to greatly improve his predominance in the field. And he starts working out, going crazy. He's getting buff, built, and all that. And occasionally he met up with Rohan. Him and Rohan had brief encounters in the gym where they would like run beside each other, or they were doing an incline bench and all that. But yeah, so this ends up happening, and we slowly progressively see as the gym life takes him over more and more. It's the average gym bro experience. And so the gym life ends up taking him over more and more. He ends up kind of ruining his relationship with his girlfriend, because I think it's actually his fiance, but I'm not for certain, because I don't know, that's one thing I didn't really pay attention to, at least the relationship between the two, because it ends up breaking anyways. But he ends up slowly ruining their relationship by bringing more and more stuff to the gym, even though it's against her asks, and he kind of ridicules her for not making him protein-dense food, because he's like, I'm not eating carbs or anything anymore, I'm just eating straight protein. And eventually we see as this progresses to the point in which he ends up just feeling straight malice for his work, his personal trainer, because he had a different appointment for other people, and he couldn't help him at that moment. And then eventually, him and Rohan end up meeting back up after the incline bench competition. They're like, we're going to have another run. And so they get on 2 treadmills, and these treadmills go up to 25 kilometers per hour. And I think it's like Usain Bolt ran at like 32 kilometers per hour. So it was quite a distance from Usain Bolt. So they were going relatively very fast, but not like super, super fast. And so they start this challenge, and they get to running. And it's just slowly progressing until we see as the dude who's the opponent guy, he ends up throwing a dumbbell through the window, so if Rohan ends up falling off his thing, he's going to go flying out. And during this, eventually they get up to about the 25 kilometer per hour thing, and Rohan goes to grab for it, but he misses, and the other dude grabs it, and he's like, I'm going to stop you, but then he ends up using Heaven's Door, and he learns that this dude actually killed all the people who wronged him. He killed his personal trainer, he killed this delivery dude who came when it was his bedtime at the apartment, and he killed his girlfriend. So I guess the people who were, like, silencing his gains ended up getting murdered. But, yeah, so Rohan does it. He writes that he will point the stop button at his treadmill rather than the dude's, and this ends up causing him to stop, and the dude ends up flying off into the gap that he made, and Rohan's like, okay, if I go over there and look over, I'm going to die. So Rohan just walks off, and that's really the end of the episode. So yeah, I really enjoyed Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe. It was really goofy, kind of like, I like the one-shot nature of it, because you didn't have to watch all the episodes to understand the other ones, because it was all just really tales. And I liked seeing a little bit more of the Part 4 cast, because I love Koichi. Koichi's probably my favorite character in all of Part 4, and I like to see him in there, and got to see some more Okuyasu, got to see a little bit of, I think the only ones that, and, crap, I always forget her name, but Koichi's girlfriend. You get to see a little bit of her too, and so yeah, it's just a really enjoyable little like kind of slice of life, but not really extra JoJo's content. So yeah, I'd highly recommend it in preparation for Steel Ball Run. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for episode 34 of Shelf Review and Thus Spoke Rohan Kishibe. So thank you very much for watching.